Welcome to Quiet Night Chronicles, where we explore the gentle wisdom of ages past. Tonight, we'll drift into the peaceful world of ancient shipbuilding, where master craftsmen worked with simple tools and profound knowledge to create vessels that carried civilizations across the world's waters. Picture yourself in a quiet seaside workshop, where the soft sound of wooden mallets and the whisper of waves create a timeless rhythm. Imagine walking through an ancient shipyard as dawn breaks gently over the harbor. The air carries the rich scent of oak shavings and pine pitch, while craftsmen begin their daily work with movements refined by generations of practice. These master builders possess secrets that modern shipwrights are only now beginning to understand fully. Their techniques, passed down through careful apprenticeships, created vessels that could flex with the ocean's moods rather than fight against them. In this peaceful exploration, we'll uncover these time-honored methods, from the selection of the perfect tree to the final application of protective coatings. Each technique represents not just practical knowledge, but a deep understanding of wood, water, and the eternal dance between them. Our journey begins in the quiet forests where ancient shipbuilders sought their most precious resource. Picture yourself walking among towering oak trees, their branches swaying gently in the coastal breeze. The selection of wood was perhaps the most critical decision an ancient shipwright would make, requiring both technical knowledge and an almost mystical understanding of timber. Vikings, those masterful seafarers, understood that not all oak was created equal. They specifically sought trees that had grown in challenging, windy conditions along exposed coastlines. These trees, bent and shaped by decades of storms, developed irregular grain patterns that provided extraordinary strength and flexibility. The constant movement against wind had created a natural tension within the wood fibers, making them ideal for vessels that needed to bend with powerful waves rather than snap under pressure. Imagine the patience required as builders would spend months examining potential trees, reading the story written in their bark and branches. They understood that a tree's struggle against the elements had prepared it for an even greater battle against the sea. The process of preparing this precious timber required equal patience and wisdom. Ancient shipbuilders developed seasoning techniques that modern craftsmen still admire for their effectiveness. Picture logs being carefully lowered into tidal pools or specially constructed basins filled with salt water. Here, they would rest for months or even years, the salt gradually penetrating every fiber. This extended soaking prevented the wood from warping and splitting once it became part of a ship's hull. The salt acted as a natural preservative, protecting against rot and shipworms that could devastate an untreated vessel. Different cultures developed their own variations of this process. Some Mediterranean builders preferred to season their timber in fresh mountain streams before transitioning to saltwater, believing this gradual change created more stable wood. Others would bury planks in wet sand for entire seasons, allowing the minerals to slowly saturate the grain. The timing of this seasoning was often linked to lunar cycles and seasonal changes, with master builders believing that wood cut during certain moon phases and seasoned during specific seasons would prove more durable. This wasn't mere superstition, but careful observation of how moisture, temperature, and time affected the timber's properties. Once the wood was properly seasoned, ancient craftsmen employed joinery techniques that seem almost magical in their simplicity and effectiveness. The Mortise-and-Tenon joint became the foundation of shipbuilding across many cultures, but each civilization refined it to suit their particular needs. Egyptian shipbuilders perfected a system where wooden planks were connected by precisely cut slots and corresponding projections, held secure by wooden pegs driven through both pieces. These joints were designed with a subtle genius that allowed the entire hull to flex as one organic unit. When waves struck the vessel, the force was distributed throughout the structure rather than concentrated at rigid connection points. Imagine the quiet concentration of a craftsman carefully shaping a tenon with simple hand tools, each cut guided by years of experience and an intimate knowledge of wood grain. The tolerances were incredibly tight, often requiring the pieces to be gently tapped together with wooden mallets. Too loose, and the joint would fail under stress. Too tight, and the wood might split when it swelled with moisture. This delicate balance required not just skill, but an intuitive understanding of how different woods behaved in various conditions. The sound of a properly fitted joint had its own distinctive note, a subtle whisper that experienced builders could recognize immediately. The ancient approach to hull construction revealed fundamentally different philosophies about how ships should be built. Most Mediterranean cultures developed what modern shipwrights call the shell-first method, a technique that seems counterintuitive to contemporary builders. Picture a craftsman beginning with the vessel's outer skin, carefully shaping each plank to follow the graceful curves that would slice efficiently through water. Starting with the keel, the backbone of the ship, builders would attach planks edge to edge, creating the hull's shape before adding any internal framework. This method required extraordinary skill in visualizing the final form and understanding how each plank would contribute to the vessel's overall strength and flexibility. The shell became a self-supporting structure, with each plank held in place by its neighbors through carefully crafted joints and wooden fastenings. Only after the hull's shape was complete would shipwrights add ribs and frames to provide additional strength. This approach created vessels that seemed to grow organically from the water's edge, their lines flowing like natural forms rather than rigid geometric constructions. The flexibility built into these shells allowed them to work with the sea's motion, ride in waves rather than battling them. Watch in your mind's eye as experienced builders run their hands along the developing curves, feeling for imperfections and adjusting the shape through subtle modifications. Meanwhile, in distant China, shipbuilders were developing revolutionary techniques that wouldn't appear in Western vessels for many centuries. Chinese junk builders understood the critical importance of watertight compartments, creating ships that could survive damage that would sink any other vessel of their time. Picture the methodical process of constructing these bulkheads, solid walls that divided the ship's interior into separate chambers. Each compartment was sealed completely from its neighbors, so that if one section flooded, the rest of the vessel would remain buoyant. This concept seems obvious now, but it represented a fundamental breakthrough in maritime safety. The bulkheads weren't merely structural additions. They were integral to the ship's design from the earliest planning stages. Chinese builders developed special joinery techniques to ensure these dividing walls remained watertight, even as the ship flexed in heavy seas. They used a combination of precisely fitted planking, natural sealants, and ingenious overlap patterns that actually grew tighter under pressure. The construction of each bulkhead required the same care and attention as the outer hull, with craftsmen testing the seals repeatedly before moving to the next section. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of builders as they completed each watertight compartment, knowing they had added another layer of safety for future voyagers. The art of keeping water out of ships required mastery of various sealing techniques that combined available materials with deep understanding of how wood and water interacted. Traditional caulking was far more sophisticated than simply stuffing gaps with whatever was available. Picture craftsmen carefully preparing oakum, the twisted fibers of old rope that had been picked apart strand by strand. This material was often soaked in tar or other preservatives before being worked into the seams between planks using specialized tools. The process required a delicate touch, enough pressure to create a tight seal without damaging the wood. Different regions developed their own preferred caulking materials based on local resources and conditions. Mediterranean builders often used a mixture of oakum and pine pitch, heated to precise temperatures that allowed it to flow into every tiny gap while remaining flexible when cooled. Some cultures incorporated animal hair into their caulking mixtures, believing it provided additional strength and resilience. The hair would interweave with the plant fibers, creating a tough, flexible seal that could accommodate the constant expansion and contraction of wooden hulls. Northern European builders sometimes used a mixture that included lime mortar, creating a seal that would actually harden underwater, forming an almost stone-like barrier against the sea. The tools used by ancient shipwrights were marvels of specialized design. Each one evolved over generations to perform specific tasks with maximum efficiency. Picture the quiet rhythm of an adze shaping a curved beam, the tool's blade striking wood with measured precision. Unlike modern power tools, these implements required the craftsman to develop an intimate relationship with both the tool and the material. The shipwright's adze had a curved blade set at a right angle to the handle, allowing the builder to hollow out curved surfaces with smooth, controlled strokes. Each tool was often made by the craftsman himself or inherited from a master, the handle worn smooth by countless hours of use. Measuring tools were equally specialized and often surprisingly sophisticated. Ancient builders used various forms of proportional systems rather than precise measurements, understanding that ships needed to maintain certain ratios rather than exact dimensions. They employed simple but effective devices, like the builder's square for checking right angles, and flexible battens that could be bent to create fair curves. Some cultures developed measuring rods, marked with traditional units that related to the human body, making it easy for craftsmen to work without complex calculations. The sound of these tools at work created a gentle symphony in the shipyard. The tap of mallets, the whisper of planes, and the soft thud of adzes, blending with the natural sounds of wind and water. The transmission of shipbuilding knowledge through apprenticeship systems created an unbroken chain of wisdom that stretched across centuries. Picture a young apprentice watching intently as his master demonstrates the proper way to read wood grain or the correct angle for cutting a scarf joint. This knowledge couldn't be learned from books or diagrams. It required years of careful observation and practice under expert guidance. Apprentices began with the simplest tasks, perhaps sorting wood chips or maintaining tools, gradually earning the right to attempt more complex work. The relationship between master and student was built on mutual respect and understanding that the craft's survival depended on accurate transmission of skills. Masters shared not just techniques, but the reasoning behind them, explaining why certain woods were chosen for specific applications, or how weather conditions affected the timing of various construction phases. This oral tradition preserved subtle knowledge that written instructions could never capture, such as the feel of properly seasoned wood or the sound of a well-fitted joint. The apprentice learned to trust his senses, developing an intuitive understanding that would guide his work throughout his career. Years would pass before an apprentice was permitted to work on critical joints or trusted with decisions about wood selection. Even then, the master's guidance continued, offering corrections and suggestions that refined the student's developing skills. Beyond wood, ancient shipbuilders mastered a complex array of materials that were essential to creating seaworthy vessels. Rope was perhaps the second most critical component, and its manufacture was an art in itself. Picture craftsmen carefully selecting fibers, whether hemp, flax, or other plant materials, each chosen for specific properties of strength and durability. The process of rope making required understanding how different fibers behaved when twisted together, and how the twist itself contributed to the rope's overall strength. Different types of cordage served various purposes on a ship, from massive cables that could secure the vessel in harbor to delicate lines that controlled sail adjustments. The preparation of these fibers often involved soaking, beating, and combing processes that could take weeks to complete properly. Natural adhesives presented another challenge, as builders needed substances that would remain effective in the harsh marine environment. Pine pitch was perhaps the most commonly used, harvested from living trees through careful scoring that didn't kill the tree, but encouraged resin production. This pitch could be heated and mixed with other materials to create compounds with different properties, some more flexible, others harder and more water-resistant. Some cultures developed sophisticated recipes that included ingredients like beeswax, animal fats, or even ground shells, each component contributing specific characteristics to the final mixture. The preparation of these materials required its own specialized knowledge, passed down through generations of craftsmen who understood the subtle chemistry involved. The timing of shipbuilding activities was intricately connected to seasonal rhythms that modern builders often overlook. Ancient craftsmen understood that different phases of construction were best suited to particular times of year, and they planned their work accordingly. Picture a shipyard in late autumn as builders take advantage of cooler, more stable weather to begin the delicate work of shaping hull planks. The wood was less likely to check or split in the moderate temperatures, and the craftsmen could work without the intense heat that made summer construction challenging. Spring often brought the installation of frames and internal structures, as the warming weather made it easier to bend heavy timbers into the required curves. The application of protective coatings typically waited for late spring or early summer, when warm temperatures help the materials flow evenly and cure properly. This seasonal approach required careful planning, as builders had to coordinate the completion of various components to coincide with optimal weather conditions. Delays could mean waiting months for the right conditions to return. So experienced shipwrights built buffer time into their schedules. The rhythm of seasonal construction also allowed for periods of preparation and material gathering, times when craftsmen could focus on selecting and seasoning timber, preparing rope and pitch, or maintaining and sharpening tools. This cyclical approach created a natural balance between intensive construction periods and quieter times devoted to preparation and planning. Regional variations in shipbuilding reflected both available materials and different philosophies about how vessels should interact with water. Northern European builders, working with abundant oak forests and facing challenging North Sea conditions, developed robust construction techniques that emphasized strength above all else. Their vessels were built like floating fortresses, with heavy frames and thick planking that could withstand the punishment of storm-driven seas. Picture these sturdy craft with their deep drafts and solid construction, designed to plow through waves rather than dance over them. Mediterranean builders, blessed with calmer seas and different woods, created more elegant vessels that relied on flexibility and efficiency. Their ships featured lighter construction and more refined lines, designed to move swiftly through relatively predictable waters. The difference wasn't just practical, but philosophical, representing different relationships with the sea itself. Northern builders saw the ocean as an adversary to be conquered through brute strength, while Mediterranean craftsmen viewed it more as a partner in an intricate dance. These regional approaches influenced everything from the selection of materials to the training of craftsmen, creating distinct traditions that could be recognized immediately by experienced mariners. Even within regions, individual builders developed their own variations and innovations, constantly refining techniques based on experience and changing needs. The sophisticated techniques used by Roman shipbuilders represented perhaps the pinnacle of ancient maritime technology, incorporating innovations that wouldn't be seen again for centuries. Roman vessels, particularly their largest cargo ships, required engineering solutions that pushed the boundaries of wooden ship construction. Picture the massive grain ships that supplied Rome, vessels so large that they challenged the very limits of what could be achieved with traditional materials and methods. These ships required lead sheathing on their hulls, a technique that demanded sophisticated metalworking skills alongside traditional shipbuilding knowledge. The lead sheets were carefully shaped and fitted to follow the hull's curves, then secured with bronze nails that wouldn't corrode in salt water. The sheathing protected the wooden hull from shipworms, the marine borers that could quickly destroy an unprotected vessel in warm waters. The installation process required precise coordination between metalworkers and shipwrights, as the lead had to be applied at exactly the right stage of construction. Too early, and the sheathing would be damaged by subsequent work. Too late, and it would be impossible to achieve proper fit and coverage. Roman builders also developed advanced pumping systems, and sophisticated rigging arrangements that allowed their massive vessels to be handled by relatively small crews. These innovations represented the culmination of centuries of experience and experimentation, techniques that combined traditional craftsmanship with engineering principles that approached modern understanding. As we near the end of our gentle journey through ancient shipbuilding wisdom, it's worth reflecting on the profound knowledge these craftsmen possessed. They worked without detailed plans or complex calculations, yet created vessels that could traverse vast oceans and withstand conditions that would challenge modern ships. Their understanding of materials, structure, and the sea itself came from generations of careful observation and patient experimentation. Picture the quiet satisfaction of a master shipwright as he surveys a completed vessel, knowing that every joint, every plank, every fitting has been crafted with care and wisdom accumulated over centuries. These ancient techniques represent more than just historical curiosities. They offer insights into sustainable practices and time-tested solutions that modern builders are rediscovering. The flexibility built into ancient hulls, the use of renewable materials, and the integration of construction with natural rhythms all speak to an approach that worked in harmony with both materials and environment. Their apprenticeship systems ensured that knowledge was preserved and refined, creating an unbroken chain of wisdom that connected each generation of builders with those who came before. In closing this peaceful exploration of ancient shipbuilding secrets, we've discovered that these master craftsmen possessed a deep understanding that went far beyond simple technique. They knew how to read the language written in wood grain, how to listen to the whispered secrets of joints under stress, and how to work with the sea's own rhythms rather than against them. Their vessels carried more than cargo across ancient waters. They carried the accumulated wisdom of generations, the patient knowledge of craftsmen who understood that the best ships were grown as much as built, shaped by human hands, working in partnership with natural materials and forces. The quiet shipyards where these vessels took shape were schools of practical philosophy, places where the ancient relationship between human skill and natural materials was celebrated and preserved. Though the sounds of ancient shipyards have long since faded, their wisdom continues to inspire those who seek to understand the eternal partnership between human creativity and the patient gifts of the natural world. If you found this journey peaceful, consider subscribing to Quiet Night Chronicles for more restful explorations. Until next time,